All right, today I'm going to talk about Black Wave by Kim Ghattas. So I did this book review for my modern release class. I found it really interesting. There are a lot of things that Ghattas does well. I must say, she's a fantastic writer. This book is very engaging, but I do think that there were some shortcomings in the overall argument that the book was making. So essentially the main thesis that Ghattas makes is that in 1979, everything in the Middle East changed because of really three events. The third isn't really talked about though, so we'll glance over. I feel like it's only mentioned like on a few pages, in all honesty. Um, so the first is the Iranian Revolution. This happens against the so we have a U.S. backed government in Iran, and essentially, the people revolt, and there is a lot of rising. You could say nationalism, but also a lot of rising Islamism. So viewing Islam as the lens in which you should govern, in which life should be centered. I don't know if that makes any sense, but either way, you have this rising tide, which later gets called the Black Wave by an Egyptian filmmaker, which is where the book gets the title. But this rising tide is a revolution. Ayatollah Khomeini comes into power, and we get a very very terrible regime who's killed a lot of people, who's been very authoritarian and insanely brutal. And so this revolution happens, as well as the siege in Mecca. What happens in the siege in Mecca is it's this again another Islamist group sees that essentially Mecca is being corrupted. So what they do naturally is they take guns, of course, and they lay siege in a way to Mecca. But it really is more the Saudi Arabian military that lays the siege, and that's where we're gonna get the name. But this extremist group kills. I'm pretty sure they kill an imam who was speaking at the time, and quite a few innocents. The imam was innocent, of course. We can't blame someone for just being there at the wrong time. But this group ends up holding out in Mecca, and then the Saudi Arabian government besieges it. And both of these events, as well as the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in December of that year, is what starts the Black Wave. Is what Goddess argues. And there are a few things that she does really well. She writes so well. She is very engaging. She helps the audience stay locked in the whole time. She does a really good job of humanizing people as well. She gets very wide, and I holistic might be a good way to say it, but she doesn't get people from every walk of life. She tends to favor journalists. She herself is a writer, of course. Journalists, writers, musicians, people in the news. Journalists. What am I saying? But you get what I'm saying. So a lot of these people become kind of characters, we could say, and we see them in very interesting lights, and we're able to look at these different countries through their eyes and through their perspective, and we see how things are happening, how the violence is affecting these individuals. And even though it's not like a narrative, you could say it's a narrative nonfiction, but I wouldn't really call it a narrative through their eyes. I think it's a nonfiction book describing their lives. It's almost like a blend, and I think she does that really really well. So if you want an engaging read about Middle East politics, this is fantastic. I could not recommend Black Wave anymore. Um, if you are a complete beginner, however, I think that you might run into some confusion, and you might not get a very holistic view of the history of the region. So the biggest thing that I think the Black Wave falls short with is the overall history of the Middle East. Gaddis seems to blame everything that happened off of the revolution and off of this siege in Mecca. So essentially, we have a Shia Muslim in Iran, and the Sunni Muslim community in Saudi Arabia. Both of the governments essentially weaponize their different versions of Islam, and Iran especially starts to fund different groups to commit violence, and these essentially competitors butt heads on who is going to be more extreme, who is going to be more vicious, and who's going to really carry the flag of Islam into the future. I think that Ghattas is missing so much history. I really think so. I think that if you're going to write a book about the politics and the rise of like Islamism, maybe the Iranian Revolution, the Siege of Mecca, like where these ideas originated from, it seems almost as when she reads this as if they came from immaculate conception. And obviously this isn't true. Like a revolution just can't happen overnight. So I think that Gaddis is really, really missing out on um added history. Really, any like you can't write about this region without mentioning the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, World War One, like colonialism, how that affected Pan Arab nationalism. Um, there's not really too much of a mention of Wahhabism either, if I'm being honest. And we're talking about religious extremism in Saudi Arabia, and where I really felt like there was a lot of history that was either glanced over, not really fully developed, or just missed. Like we missed out on a lot on the Israel Palestine conflict, and Iran weaponizes this so much, and they use it to help defend their actions. They use it to promote violence in the region, and we're just not talking about it. And we even get the in this book. There's a moment where the Saudi Arabian prince he blames 9/11 on the Israelis, and obviously he's deflecting. Let's be real here. He's being a politician and he's calling out an enemy, but I really wish we talked a little bit more about the impact of the Israel Palestine conflict in the region and how that affected things, because it almost seems as if these these two events like the siege in Mecca and the Iranian Revolution, of specifically the Khomeini Revolution, like they um, I I say that because there's some chaos in Iran right now, and there was a little bit of a coup with Operation Ajax. So I was talking specifically about Khomeini. Like it seems like she's talking about it as if it's just immaculate conception, like Big Bang. You know what I mean? And we know that things cause other things, and we know that we just can't get a snap of fingers and something happens across the world. But oh well. So she doesn't really dive into anything like before 1979. If she does, it's not fleshed out. It really isn't. But the Black Wave, I still think is fantastic. I still think that Ghattas is a great writer. I think that she has a lot of skill, and I will definitely be checking out more of her work in the future. She's fantastic. Her sources too are really great. She did a lot of interviews. She speaks French, she speaks English, she speaks Arabic, so she's able to do these interviews. Mostly in Arabic, obviously, but there are a lot of French and English sources in this book as well that influenced her writing. And so, yeah, it's fascinating. She also, I forgot to mention, she also makes sure to include women more in the history. And let's be real, they are written out of a lot of history, especially history from such a patriarchal society. And so the inclusion of women is awesome, and the highlighting them specifically in the Iranian Revolution, and like counter what am I looking for? And like counter riots against the Ayatollah, where we're talking about women ripping off their hijab, and we're talking about there's a specific journalist, I don't remember her name from the book, in Pakistan, who essentially goes on air for forever and refuses to put on the veil, despite the rising Islamism in the area. And so yeah, that's awesome. Awesome. She did a really good job with that. So if you want to learn more about women in the late 20th century in the Middle East and Pakistan and Afghanistan, not really Afghanistan, but if you want to learn more about 1980 to now, this is fantastic. So I cannot recommend this enough. It's a cheap book. It's an easy read. Honestly, a breeze. Only 300 some odd pages. So yeah, great. It's a fantastic book. Thank you.